Talk with some DNR staff and experts about the 10-year history of DNR's Eagle Cam. So we're going to introduce ourselves to you. Then our head guru here, Lori, is going to give us a little bit of an overview of the last 10 years of the DNR's Eagle Cam. And then we're going to have some discussion and question answer. We're going to ask you guys some things. You can ask us some things. And then we'll wrap up by about 1:40. So my name's Erica Hoagland. I'm one of DNR's non-game wildlife specialists, and I cover about a quarter of the state, from about Little Falls over to Wisconsin, down through the metro to Iowa. I do a wide range of things, including working on things like the Eagle Cam. I also do things like surveys and research. I'm also one of the folks that answers the phone if you call DNR wondering things about non-game species. So that's me. I'll pass you off to the rest of the team here.
My name's Jed Beecher. I'm part of the technical team behind the camera, so I work on the streaming and connectivity, that kind of stuff. And I'm on the DNR's central web team.
Hello everybody, my name is Elizabeth Noltmauer. I am one of the communication specialists for the Non-Game Wildlife Program. I do a lot of different things. I manage our Facebook page, I work on the non-game web pages, and I am also the sort of backup Lori when it comes to all things Eagle Cam.
Hi everyone, I'm Lori Nauman, and I am part of the Eagle Cam team, as you know, and I'm the main operator of the Eagle Cam, so I'm the one zooming around, zooming in, getting all of the indecent shots of the eagles, but all the decent shots also. And it's just great to be here, and it's great to see everyone. I want to start this, well, first of all, this Eagle Cam was placed 10 years ago, and Jed Beecher was a huge part of getting that up and running. Without him, it never would have happened. So, and without Elizabeth doing all of our Facebook stuff and all of that, there's no way I could do this by myself. So I'm so grateful for this team, and Erica answering all the biology questions that I can't answer. It's just awesome. So I want to start this though by asking you folks some questions first. So how many of you are familiar with Eagle Cam? How many of you are familiar with the Friends of the Non-Game Wildlife Eagle Cam Facebook page? Our administrators are here, sitting in the front row over there, and they're also our famous photographers. So if you have a chance to go over and say hi to Thomas and Bonnie, do that. They're here. They're much bigger stars than I am. And how many of you, what's my next question? So you're on the Facebook. How many of you are on the Non-Game Wildlife Facebook page? Only a few. So we have our own Facebook page for the Non-Game Wildlife Program, and the purpose for this Eagle Cam is to raise awareness about the Non-Game Wildlife Program and our donation and our funds. The funding for our program comes from donations. The majority of it comes from donations and match dollars. So your checkoff on your tax forms is what covers our program, and all of our staff biologists and all of the research and surveys and everything that we do, from everything from dragonflies to turtles to frogs and toads to bald eagles. And so your donations are really, really important, and that makes this your non-game wildlife program. It's just, we can't thank you enough, and we just hope that come tax time you'll think about us, but we also have a way to donate online. So I always have to do that little shtick because it's important, and that was the whole purpose for the Eagle Cam. So I normally give a PowerPoint presentation, but out here obviously it's impossible. So I'm gonna use my cheat sheet, because when I'm speaking in public I forget things. So, one of the things that happened during the pandemic is we realized how people got really, really attached to the Eagle Cam, and were watching it just obsessively. And I think there were a lot of people who watched it obsessively before that. Okay, who watches it obsessively? Yeah, I figured some people do, and I know that it's in a lot of different classrooms. But it's a way for you to connect with nature and wildlife. And even if you can't get outdoors, and if you can't go out in nature, if for some reason you are confined and can't get out, webcams are a great way to do that, and there are a number of them, and so ours is certainly, well, I think one of the best, but it's certainly one of the great ones to watch. And it creates an emotional connection. There's some research that shows that even though you're not actually out in nature, that by watching webcams, you are getting the same emotional and health benefits as you would by watching wildlife outdoors. You're not getting the, physical exercise part of it, but you are getting the same sort of connection with wildlife. And so that's another reason for this cam. It helps you. It's sort of a spiritual experience for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people have a connection to bald eagles. That everyone has a story about when a bald eagle showed up in their life, right? I think everyone does, including myself. So it's a great way for anyone of any age to enjoy nature without even having to go outside, which is why it's on in a lot of classrooms. So our nest was discovered in about 2003 by the staff at Erica's office, the Metro Region staff. And at that time, they just recorded that there was a nest there and there were eagles there, and they started nesting. And then, many years later, some of our staff at the Metro Regional office thought it might be a good idea to put a camera in the nest. And that part of the reason was to protect those fish that are in that pond over there. The state fair fish are kept at the location where our Eagle Cam was, and they had to put security cameras around the fish because someone stole them one year, all of the state fair fish. So since they were putting electricity, we were able to put in electricity to the Eagle Cam, but that didn't happen until the end of 2012. So we installed the camera in December of 2012, thinking we had at least 3 months before the eagles would lay their eggs. And when we got up there in the bucket truck, XL Energy guys looked and said, nope, it's completely snow covered, there hasn't been anything here. We're like, okay, good. We're not bothering them or anything. By January 10th, when the camera went live, there were 3 eggs in the nest, and that was the earliest ever recorded bald eagle nesting in Minnesota, January 10th. The eggs did not hatch that year because there was a fish kill nearby, and the birds, both of the adults had left the eggs for about 25 minutes in about 20 below weather. So they did not make it, but the nest is 100 feet in the air. The nest also has infrared, so we can see at night the raccoons trying to get up into the nest, and the male comes screaming out of the darkness to attack the raccoons. And so fortunately, we've never lost any of our chicks to predators, although there have been a number of chicks that were lost to natural causes, and that's something that, it happens, and we warn folks that it can be brutal sometimes. It can be really brutal watching nature and watching the chicks suffer and kill each other sometimes, which is called siblicide, and that happens in nature. And so there are a number of dangers, obviously, but it's also a learning experience for everyone to realize that things like that happen in nature. And it's difficult to watch. I mean, everyone sees roadkill on the road, right? So it's hard. It's hard. So eagles can fly up to 30 miles an hour, but they can dive at 100 miles an hour. So when they're going after prey, they do something called a stoop, when they fold their wings in and they dive down at something like a duck. There have been a number of different things that were brought into the nest, like muskrats and And rabbits and birds and ducks and all the things get, and of course, fish end up in the nest as well. And the males are 1/3 smaller than the females. They mate for life until one of them happens to disappear. So mating for life means until one or the other of them either gets kicked out of the territory or dies of old age or is killed by another eagle or dies for some other reason. Their grip is 10 times stronger than a human's grip, meaning their talons, and they have a texture on their talons that allows them to grab fish, slippery fish, and be able to carry them without dropping them. Their eyesight is 8 times stronger than humans, and so when we're watching it on the camera and you think that they don't see something that's happening a mile away, oh yeah, they do. You know, when they're soaring way, way up there, they can see their prey down on the ground, and that's why they have such great eyesight. And they have a 6.5 foot to 7 foot wingspan. Okay, so the history of the camera, we have over the 10 years, there were, oh, and of course my totals got knocked off. Thomas. So over the years we had 3, 6, 18, 19, I think it was 25 eggs hatched, and we had a total of about 13 chicks that were fledged over that many years. Does that sound right to you? Pretty close? Okay. So that's what happens with the eagle population is they usually lay 2 to 3 eggs, sometimes 4. There was a nest at Great Cloud Island this year that laid 4 eggs, 4 chicks, and all 4 of them survived, and as far as I know, all 4 of them fledged, which is almost unheard of, completely unheard of. So that's fabulous, and the population of bald eagles in the state remains stable because when they have their chicks and they do lay 2 eggs, a lot of times something happens to 1 or 2 of them if there were 3 eggs. But they've at least replaced their own population. They're replacing them. They're replacing the pair with another bird each year, and so that increases the population. And so, when our nest unfortunately fell in 2023, it fell on April 2nd of April 2023, and when that happened, there were so many people saying, hey, I know where there's a nest if you need to put a camera in this one and this one and this one, and I was inundated with calls, and we know that there's nests all over the place, and they're doing really well in Minnesota, and part of the reason is because of our program. So we helped repopulate not only Minnesota, but we provided chicks to 8 different states throughout the U.S. To help their bald eagle populations recover as well after the DDT disaster of the 1940s and 50s. We had, in 2023 and 2022, and before that, during the pandemic, we had 1.9 million users. That means there were 1.9 million unique logins. Is that how that works? Devices. 1.9 million devices logged into the camera that year. It was viewed in 180 countries around the world, and which is the majority of the countries that can access internet. They can't hear me? Oh, okay, all right. I can just hear my breath, and that makes me, okay. All right, 186 countries. Okay, so it's viewed by 186 countries around the world. I get emails from teachers around the world who have their students watching the camera all the time. They usually have their finger right on the button so they can turn it off if something gross happens, because gross things happen in an eagle nest because they're carnivores and they eat nothing but meat, and they eat all the cute little fuzzy things, and that's tough to watch sometimes too. Even I've had to turn it off a couple of times because it was getting brutal. You could see, you could see everything, and I try to back the camera away a little bit sometimes when it gets disgusting, but it's also a learning moment. So watching eagles in Minnesota, you can see, when I said there were nests all over the place, you can go out and watch eagles in Minnesota just about anywhere, but typically there are places down along the Mississippi River in Wabasha, and there's the National Eagle Center. How many people here have been to the National Eagle Center? It's a fabulous place, and you can always see eagles there. They have some in captivity, and they have lots of nests outdoors as well. And winter time is the best time to see them because there's not a lot of leaves on the trees, so you can see eagles in the trees and in their nests and things like that. And you know, if you just look for open water near frozen areas, you're going to see bald eagles. And really, you can see large nests in the wintertime really well as also. And just looking up when you go outside, you'll see all kinds of stuff. That's my best advice that I can give you for wildlife watching, is just look up, look around. I mean, I've seen all kinds of raptors flying around here this year in the State Fair, because the Raptor Center is not too far from here, and there's raptors everywhere. So, you know, I had some tips about watching wildlife and using binoculars and things like that, but I think we'll just move along to questions, because I know you guys have questions for the Eagle Cam team, right? So that said, who has a question for any one of us here on the team? Oh, good. I'm glad she.
The question is, how does the team decide to help a chick in distress, whether in the nest or outside of the nest?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So, our initial response is that we don't interfere with nature, and we're not going to interfere, and we are not going to go into the nest. There was one year where it became a huge deal because there was a chick that was struggling in the nest, which happens a lot. But there was speculation that it was wrapped in fishing line, which also happens, and because it was human caused, there was some outside pressure to go to the nest, and it wasn't the team's decision, it was higher than us, and they decided to find out if we could actually get to the nest, and if we couldn't, then we were not going to intervene. If we could get to the nest, and we called XL Energy, and they had a bucket truck available. So we went up and got that chick from the nest. But here's the learning moment. We brought it to the Raptor Center, and it was not going to survive. So it was euthanized humanely at the Raptor Center. And that was a very important food source that was removed from the nest that could have fed the other two chicks that were struggling with not enough food, which is why the littlest one was struggling in the first place, because sometimes there just isn't enough food. One of the parents might disappear, and the other one is struggling to feed all three mouths. So the following year, the same thing happened. Things started ramping up a little bit. People were wondering if we were going to rescue it. And at one point, the female eagle turned her back to the camera, and when she turned back around, the littlest one that was struggling was gone. She fed it to the other two chicks. And even though those chicks look really tiny in the nest, and it doesn't seem like it would be much nutrition, that chick was probably, you know, 8 inches tall or so. And she fed that to her other two chicks, knowing that that was a really important source of nutrition and essential vitamins for those chicks. So it happened again a couple of years later, and I think that this is, you know, a learning moment for all of us, that we need to recognize that nature is a lot smarter than humans are. So that's how that's decided. You're welcome. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, you're fine. Oh, I was just gonna ask what is the best
So the question is, Thank you. What is the best Eagle Cam sort of interaction story with our users or our public that we can think of?
Elizabeth has this answer.
Hello, I have to say, I think one of my... Thank you, Lori. I think that one of my favorite interactions that we had happened after the nest fell last year. Lori and I went to the nest site and spent, I think, about an hour and a half to 2 hours looking for the chick, and that was a very hard hour and a half to 2 hours. You know, we knew that it was highly unlikely that the chick had survived the fall, but you can't help but hope. And as, 30 minutes went to an hour and a half, we kind of knew that that chick did not make it. We did eventually find the chick, and it was a very emotional moment for everyone. And what I remember the most of that day, though, was all of the outpouring of support and love that we got from the Eagle Cam community. We got hundreds of comments on our Facebook page talking about how much they loved the Eagle Cam, how sorry they were for our loss, how much they cared about the camera, how they hoped that we were doing okay ourselves, and it was something that really has stayed with me throughout my career. So I think that's just my favorite.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We got condolences from everyone from the governor's office to all over the United States. I mean, I had personal family and friends sending me notes and, extending condolences. So it was really emotional because that was the only chick that was left in the nest, and so that was all done and over with. So, next question. Yes, ma'am.
Tell me, and I'll tell them.
So the question is, Lori mentioned that our eagle populations in the continental US and in Minnesota have increased significantly since they're low, in like the 40s, but now they're kind of stabilized. And do we expect that to kind of continue to be the case, or is there hopes or thoughts of the eagle population increasing? Did I get it right mostly? Great. Sure, and so I can talk about that. And so this is not an uncommon story for species that are listed on endangered species lists, as the bald eagle was. Typically that happens particularly with a federal endangered species list when we're worried that the species might be lost from the country or the world entirely. And bald eagles were down to, we think, roughly 400 individuals or 400 nests at their lowest point, and now we're up to tens of thousands. Typically what happens in kind of population dynamics like this is we see really quick growth once a species population is protected extensively, particularly if that protection is effective, as it was with bald eagles. So you'll see this kind of slow growth after a couple of years of protection, and then typically the growth of the population takes off and can even become exponential. So you get this sort of slow growth, then huge population growth for a while, but then it tends to level off at something that's called the ecosystem carrying capacity. So most habitats, most ecosystems can only support kind of a given number of a particular species. And I suspect that's what we're seeing now with bald eagles, where we're at a sort of steady ecosystem capacity level where we might see fluctuations. I would expect we'd see fluctuations over time, but probably not anything as dramatic as we've seen before. The other part of that is that bald eagles have now been delisted, so they're no longer considered at risk of extinction. So essentially all of the regulators, all of the biologists that work on this species are happy with where the populations are at. They're self-sustaining really well. They're able to tolerate kind of the vagaries of being an eagle in today's world well enough, we think. So We don't have a goal of increasing bald eagle populations in the state or the country anymore. The goal is to keep them stable now. More questions?
So someone asked what a fledgling is. And a fledgling is what an eagle chick, an eagle baby, is called when it leaves the nest. So when they start exercising their wings and they decide that they're going to take off, that's called a fledgling. And we refer to them as a fledgling until they're about a year of age, and then they are either a juvenile or a immature. They're immature until the age of 5, when they get their white head and their white tail, and that's when they are mature enough to pair up and become parents themselves.
Our next question is, somebody in the audience is familiar with the work that Three Rivers Park District does with bald eagles, particularly with their surveys and productivity surveys. The head currently of that program is John Moriarty. He's about to retire. So the question was, do we work with Three Rivers in their surveys or their work with eagles? And I can say I don't regularly.
We have a new supervisor of our non-game wildlife program, and her name is Kristen Hall, and she took the place of Carol Henderson, who was our longtime non-game wildlife program supervisor and the founder of the program, and she does go and do surveys. Her master's research was in bald eagles and eagles, and so she does participate in that survey. I have not seen the results from this most recent year, but I did hear that the population was doing really well, and there were a lot more of them seen this year than in recent years. Yes?
You got to go on the flight and you have the population. So she has the population outcome of that survey.
Oh, she's got the population outcome. So this woman here in the cat shirt has the outcome. So is that on the Three Rivers Park District web page?
She went on.
Oh, you got to go on. Oh, good for you. Awesome. Right. Yes. Gray cloud. Yep. Down the Mississippi. Yep. Yes. There. 60-some nests along the Mississippi, right in the metro area. And that's in the metro, so yeah, their population is doing really well. So does anybody have any techie questions for our Eagle tech guy here? Come on, somebody's got to be a techie nerd. No? Nothing? Is there anything you want to share, Jed?
So our very first webcam is right over in that pond. We put in a fish cam here probably 12 years ago, 2 years before the Eagle Cam. So once we had done that, then we knew when the non-game team approached the IT staff that we could support a webcam. Well, we could try to support a webcam there because we had successfully done it here for 12 days. Question? Oh, so we have the non-game Falcon Cam. There's a Peregrine Falcon Cam in downtown St. Paul. And that one, was that before the Eagle Cam or after? That was before. Yeah, so that probably went in a year or two after the fish cam. So yeah, that was our first bird cam. And then we have a partnership with, well actually that's not a species, but there's a cam up at Itasca State Park. And then we have another cam in a fire tower up at Big Bog State Recreation Area. And then 2 years ago, our Fish and Wildlife Division wanted us to create a portable camera. So it actually works off of cellular connectivity, whereas the Eagle camera is connected via, well, it's got some other technology, but it's basically corded to like a Ethernet cable. But let's see, back to that Fish and Wildlife one. So it also uses solar power to charge batteries, and then it runs the camera. And in the winter, when the days are shorter and it's cold, it runs out of juice and it dies, and then it starts back up again. But it's portable, so we move it around the state. In the spring, we have it on rough sharp-tailed grouse nests we've done the last 2 years, and then we did some wood duck houses, and then we've had it on some various ponds, and then also some, well, then there was a question about bison. We've talked about trying to do one, maybe a couple of the parks where the bison are, but that hasn't happened yet. But it still might. It's definitely a possibility.
One of the things that I've enjoyed watching as DNR has kind of forayed into this technology stuff as an agency is how it helps us reach more people, different people. As an agency, we have a little bit of a history of working with a lot of the same people. And we're really trying to change that now. We're trying to help people connect with nature that is literally in your backyard or down your street, and be able to appreciate and enjoy it no matter who you are, where you live, what you can do, what your capabilities are. And webcams, I think, are one of the coolest things like that, where almost no matter who you are, what you do, what you're excited about, you can find a webcam that can help you connect with nature. And we see people that being kind of like a doorway. People will get a little bit sucked in by sitting in their living room, seeing how cool something is, and then maybe they're willing to step out the front door one day, and look up or look down and see what's around. And we get to hear those stories. People call us, and often there's like a question in there, but mostly what they want to do is tell you what they've seen and how cool it is and how they feel about it and how excited they are that we work with it and they got to see it. And so I think the technology part of that, connecting people to nature, we just see dividends paying back so quickly that it's really exciting stuff, I think, in a kind of nerdy way, but it's really fun. We got more questions? This is your chance to stump the biologists. You don't get this chance every day. Any question? We got one over there. So I think the question was, what bird species do we have GPS trackers on, and what's the range of those species? I know some of them. You guys, what? So we have transmitters on kestrels, which are a small raptor, loons, right? Common loons, golden eagles. I think there's some game birds that have some telemetry on them. The golden eagle one is interesting. That's the one I know the most about, where so they're another really large eagle that sometimes ranges into Minnesota. They're not actually that closely related to bald eagles, but they're both big, kind of epic eagles. And they really spend most of their time on the Arctic tundra. They're funky. They nest. They're this big giant eagle, and they nest on the ground. But what we found through our telemetry, we put these backpack GPS transmitters on them, and they come and spend the winter in Minnesota. So Minnesota is like their southern migration, which is wild to think as a Minnesotan, but they've flown far south just to get to Minnesota for the winter. So you can see golden eagles in Minnesota in the winter, but they spend most of their time way far up. That's the species I'm most familiar with.
So when we put GPS trackers on a species, they don't last forever, and a lot of them are meant to drop off. And so we're generally just looking for that initial information. When we first saw golden eagles in Minnesota, for instance, no one really knew where they came from. Were they coming from Montana, from the west? Where are they coming from and where are they going to? And so once those eagles passed and we had that data, now we don't have GPS on them any longer. And so right now we have GPS locators on kestrels, which are the tiny falcon. And I've seen them out here. They're a cool little, beautiful little bird. And so from time to time, it varies. It varies what research we're doing at the time. We only do it on those species that we need more data about.
We also transmitter things that aren't birds. So like, I did a telemetry study with a snake species in Minnesota. We've done it with Blanding's turtles. We've even experimented with insects, trying to track butterflies and bumblebees. So again, it's like this technology gives you so many good teasers of stuff you might be able to learn from these critters if you could just see everywhere they go for a little while. And so it really helps us understand how a whole variety of taxa use habitat and use the landscape. More questions? So the question is about bald eagles being our national symbol for the United States, as well as kind of what happens when, for example, say an eagle dies on the landscape. There's some special protections. I can talk about this one a little bit. But bald eagles and a number of other eagles used to be listed on the federal endangered species list. That's the list for the United States. They got delisted, which is great. That means they're recovering, but they're still protected legally by something called the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. They are still the national symbol of our country. And there are protocols and rules about what happens with eagles on the landscape. So they're protected, you cannot hunt them, you can't, for example, if you found a dead eagle, you couldn't just collect it because it's cool. They're protected whether they're alive or dead. Also, all of the parts of them are protected, so you can't possess like an eagle feather without a permit. One of the things that Minnesota DNR does is work to collect eagles that have died on the landscape naturally. They get sent to a federal repository that allows use of those eagle parts by Native American tribes. So they're a really important species for a lot of religious and cultural practices. And so that's one of the ways that deceased bald eagles are used and really important. But even though they are not endangered anymore, not on an endangered species list, they're still really heavily legally protected. So does that kind of answer your question? One more question. Best one. Here we go. We're ready for it.
I'll answer it. So, Bonnie asked the inevitable question, what is the future of the Eagle Cam? Now that we don't have a nest, the camera is still up at its location. It's on what's called a tour, and so it stops every 100 seconds at different positions. It's rotating. What it is a security camera, and so we can set it to tour and look around the area. We've seen lots of cool things on camera, even though the nest is no longer there. There's been osprey hanging around. I got to watch an osprey eating its entire lunch for about a half an hour one day. There's been all kinds of cool things. And we plan on leaving that camera up for the foreseeable future. We will leave it there, we will leave it in place. We do know that the existing pair did build a new nest about a half a mile south of where the nest that fell was. And they built this nest within, what, 3 months? They had, that's how quickly a bald eagle can build a nest. And so they had nothing else to do. I mean, there were these two eagles, and they were feeding this chick, and they were all busy doing this, taking care of a young one, and then all of a sudden it was gone, and they needed something to do. And eagles are almost always nest building. That's part of their courtship behavior. So that shows the other eagle that they know what they're doing, that they know how to build a nest, that they're going to be a good partner, that they're going to provide for a family. And they went and built this new nest, and sure enough, they laid eggs, and thanks to our photographers here, we know that the 2 chicks that were in that nest did fledge this year. And so our pair is still doing really well, and they're doing fine. We have researched trying to get electricity to the new nest, and I was out there with XL Energy, and unfortunately there is no way to get electricity back to this location. So that is, I know that's not great news. Bonnie's crying. But there are so many bald eagles around the metro area, and we know that they will stop at where the existing camera is, and they're gonna, they'll be visiting the area, and we'll still be operating it as often as we can. And as you all know, we do have a new camera ready to go up in a new nest somewhere. All right, well, that's all we have time for. Thank you all very much. I'm surprised how many people showed up, so thank you.